Hey, Diana, did you know selling with stories is easy?
Mark, that's the dumbest thing you've ever said.
Ladies and gentlemen, jurists, and just curious, welcome to the Successful Barrister Podcast. Here you'll learn about marketing, management, and life skills for lawyers that probably won't get you disbarred. Hosted by Marc Whitehead, a seasoned lawyer who remembers when fax machines were cutting edge, and Diana Berry, attorney, COO, and the brains behind the scenes. Together, they are the legal world's most dynamic duo since statutes met regulations. So if you're looking to build a practice, not a prison, you're in the right place. Welcome to the Successful Barrister, where legal legends are made.
And welcome to the Successful Barrister Podcast, the podcast for lawyers about marketing, management, and life skills that probably won't get you disbarred. I am your host, Marc Whitehead, alongside my co-host, my right hand, my COO, Diana Berry. Hey, Diana, what's up?
Hey, Mark. Welcome back.
Yes, so I just got back literally a couple of hours ago from Marc Lanier's Trial Summit or Trial Academy. I'm not sure how he calls it Lanier 9.0 since it's the ninth one.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
So I've been at Lanier's Academy the last 2.5 days.
And I was out the last couple of days before that, so hey.
You were in the Dominican Republic working hard, I'm sure.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Not.
Well, not.
Absolutely
okay.
not. But I'm glad to hear you had a good time. Maybe we should do a podcast on Lanier's.
Oh, I've already started working on that.
Oh,
so,
excellent.
Yes.
Okay, awesome.
So, to brief spoiler alert, whatever, which feeds into our podcast today, was Lanier's big theme and themes on how to try lawsuits is that you must turn your case into a compelling story. Because stories sell, because stories are memorable, because stories move people. Because a good story is not going to bore the jury. You know, these were all the things that he just kept going back and forth for 2.5 days. One of the unique things about Lanier's program is it's just Marc Lanier for 2.5 straight days.
No guest speakers?
No guest speakers, no nothing. And he just goes at it for two. And so what you get is you get a complete picture of how he tries lawsuits.
Wow.
So it's not disjointed. It's not, a bit here and a bit there. And that's the problem when you have, programs that have a lot of different speakers. Everything becomes a little disjointed and not very well organized. Mm-hmm. And you might even have people who have conflicting opinions and yada, yada, yada. Where with Marc Lanier, it is just 2.5 straight days of this is how I try cases and get multi-million and multi-billion-dollar verdicts.
Wow.
From soup to nuts. And a lot of it, he talked a lot about AI as well. And he's convinced me that I might be switching from ChatGPT to Claude because he loves Claude, and he was demonstrating that on how he uses it to develop case themes, develop cross-examinations, and so forth. Opening statements, closing statements, and so forth. But he was really setting up frameworks on how to create and tell a compelling story.
And that's what we're talking about today, is using, a book, right?
What we're talking about here is a book that was an Atticus assignment, I want to say 4 or 5 years ago, probably pre-pandemic, called Story Selling. Now, in that context, it's about creating stories in order to sell your services. In other words, to create stories that are useful for your marketing and advertising programs. As opposed to Marc Lanier was talking about how to create compelling stories to convince a jury to come back in your client's favor. But the points are fairly analogous, is that stories motivate people to act. Whether you want to motivate a jury to act on behalf of your client and award damages or find them not guilty or whatever it is you're trying to do, as opposed to or similarly to our world where we are trying to use stories to compel would-be clients to become actual paid clients, basically to get them to hire our firm as opposed to the choice of thousands of other law firms out there that they could hire. And that's kind of the point of the book, Story Selling.
Well, yep. And so is it It's by Donald Miller. The book is called Building a Story Brand.
Building a story brand, but I think he calls it mostly story selling within the concept. And I think when Atticus developed it into sort of a lawyer-specific curriculum, they sort of went with the story selling as opposed to story branding. But I think it's the same thing. Branding, selling, pretty much the same thing.
So this is yet another marketing podcast.
It is another marketing podcast.
I'm shocked, Mark, that you found another one.
Another one. Our ratings are going through the roof. And so I think the concept here is the problem with most marketing, particularly lawyers, is that we try to basically sell ourselves. We try to pump ourselves up. And a lot of times that creates confusion. It doesn't really move the needle. It's not compelling. We constantly talk about ourselves. We don't talk about our clients, and we don't talk about our clients' problems enough. And I think that's the whole concept behind the story branding, the story selling, is that you make your client the hero of the story, not you, not your law firm. You're not the hero. The analogy that was used in the book, and when Steve Riley presented this at Atticus, he really expounded upon it, is look at any particularly older movies, okay? And they all followed sort of your basic premise. And the basic premise was you have a character that's the hero of the story, that has a problem, that meets a guide. In this analogy, we, the lawyer, are the guide, who has a problem. Therefore, the guide gives the hero a plan that calls him to action, that helps him avoid failure, and that ends in success. Okay? And it always helps to make a good story if there's a villain in the story. Okay, so the analogy they used was Star Wars, the original Star Wars. You remember, back 1976, Mark Hamill. Who else was in? Come on, help me out here.
Nope, sorry.
Okay, so Mark Hamill played
Wrong
Luke
team member.
Skywalker. Okay, you're not a Trekkie. You're not a Star Wars person.
I'm just here.
You're a rom-com girl, aren't you?
No, and yeah, there's nothing wrong with a good rom-com, but I've watched some of the new ones, but I don't know the original 1976.
All right. So apparently I'm going to have to lay this out. I didn't realize I was going to have to lay out Star Wars to you, but I will lay it out for you.
Thank you, Mark.
Okay. So we have a character, not Han Solo. We have the character Luke Skywalker. Okay. Luke has a problem. Okay. Apparently the Empire is coming after him because he's bought some drones. Okay. What does he do about it? He goes to the desert searching for his drones, and he runs across Obi-Wan Kenobi, who is the guide in this story. All right. The guide gives him a plan. You've got to go return these droids to where they came from, i.e. Princess Leia, if I'm remembering correctly. So he has a call to action. He's got to get the droids back to where they need to be, which helps him avoid failure, which is the failure in this case would be, the Empire, the evil Empire, coming and hunting him down. And it ultimately ends in success where the Death Star is destroyed. Now, the added bonus in here is we have a good villain. Who's the villain? Come on, you got to know this one.
Yes, but when you put me on the spot, no, I'm not going to know it.
Who's the villain in Darth Vader? Thank you.
Oh my gosh, the real pressure.
I was about to stop the podcast right here.
Pressure
You could not come up with
were
Darth
we gonna
Vader.
Were we going to renegotiate?
We were just
going to
renegotiate the contract right here, right now.
Because if I didn't know Darth Vader.
If you didn't know who the Darth Vader was, the villain of Star Wars,
I did.
I don't think I could. We just could not continue.
That's okay. I would say that's fair, but it's not. But we have a good villain.
So the point is, if you look at that scenario, the hero who meets a guide, who gives him a plan with a call to action, with an end, with a tangible ending that needs to happen to avoid failure. Look back at all the movies that were, back in the old days, in the 30s and the 40s and the 50s and the 60s, when they really made what I call good movies, not the crap they make today. Mm-hmm. You can find that theme in all of those movies. It's a classic storytelling device. So that's the point. That is what we're going to talk about today. So what we're trying to do here is, and what the book is encouraging people to do is to go through this framework. And in part 2 of our podcast today, we're going to go through the framework and show you how we did it. But to use this framework of the hero meets a guide who gives them a plan, yada, 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 and how to use that to actually market your law firm in a way that's actually effective and puts your client in the center of the story and not you.
And Miller calls this the StoryBrand's SB7 framework. Is that correct? Because there's 7 elements.
There's 7 elements to it. We love lists because lists fit well within a podcast format. Plus, they fit well in your spreadsheets, and you know you love using spreadsheets.
But it's also very easy to remember. SB7 it sounds really cool.
SB7.
SB7. So 7 different elements to the story branding, which all ultimately creates clarity around your marketing message.
Right. So clarity is what you want in a marketing message. Complexity creates confusion. That's what you don't want in your marketing message. And so the whole point is to create clarity in your story and then create a story that connects with your potential customer, your potential client. And then we all can make money because that's what we're here to do. All right. So when we come back, we're going to go through the SB7,
7-part SB7.
The 7-part SB7 series on how to create a story brand within your own law firm.
This podcast is sponsored by Marc Whitehead and Associates, a national disability benefits law firm. Marc Whitehead runs a firm of over 60 dedicated people whose mission is to make a difference in the lives of our injured and disabled clients. Marc represents disabled claimants in Social Security disability, private disability insurance, and veterans disability claims in all 50 states. Marc Whitehead is double board certified in both Social Security disability law and personal injury trial law. Marc has litigated disability cases in over 40 states and counting and can help your clients too. Stop throwing your phone calls away. Call Marc Whitehead at 701-VIP-LEAD. That's 701-VIP-LEAD, or visit our website at disabilitydenials.com. Referral fees are paid in all jurisdictions where it is permitted. Refer us your disability cases today and know that your clients will be in good hands.
All right, so we're going to create, through the SB7 framework, the StoryBrand framework, how we created the story. Specifically, we call it Mike the Mechanic.
Our story
Within our law firm. So Mike himself is actually a true person, but I've added elements from other client journeys to sort of fill in some of the gaps, because not every actual client can make the perfect story. So Mike is sort of an amalgamation of several different clients, but primarily one named Mike, and he really was a mechanic.
Oh.
Hence Mike the Mechanic. And an ode to what Mike Rutherford of Mike the Mechanics, the 1980s spinoff band from Genesis. You got to remember that one.
Nope.
Where are your cultural references?
They're missing today. I mean, let's try again tomorrow, but today.
Oh my God!
So
you do know who Genesis is, don't you?
Yes.
Phil Collins, Genesis,
Yes.
Mike Rutherford.
Yes.
Oh my God. Okay. All right. I will forgive you for not knowing Mike the Mechanic.
Thank you.
All right. They had the Muppets. They had everything. That was just you were clearly not a child of the 80s.
I was a child in the 80s.
Then where the hell were you? Did you not have
Not
cable or
listening.
something?
No, I did not. I really did not. So now that you can condemn my childhood another day.
I'm going to
But we're going to talk about Mike the Mechanic using the SB7 framework, so we can kind of show our listeners how we built it.
How we built it.
And so
how
they
we
can
use
maybe
it.
do this on their own.
Okay.
All right, Mark, let's start. So you
All
start
right.
with...
The purpose is to create a story that is relatable to your clients. Okay. So first of all, you have to establish a hero of the story. That is step 1 within the SB7 framework, is you have to find the hero. Well, guess what? Our hero should always be our client. So it's the client that should be the focus of our law firm, not the law. The client's the protagonist of the story. For those of you who can't remember high school English, the protagonist is the hero of the story, generally speaking. I honestly probably never learned that either. I learned it later.
He's the one you pull for.
Yes, he's the one you're pulling for. So you don't lead with we're a great law firm. We won over 1,000 cases. You lead with the client's struggle. You lead with what their problem is that they are trying to solve. So in our case, Mike the mechanic, our hero, is injured. He's out of work, and he's trying to support his family. That's our hero of the story, and that's his backstory. And your hero, part 2, is your hero has a problem. Okay, problems can come in multiple forms. There's external problems. In this case, Mike can't physically do his job anymore. And then there's the internal problems that Mike is having. He's feeling lost. He's feeling afraid. He's feeling like he failed his family. This is when you're fleshing out this story. And you want to actually give some gravitas to your story. We actually write this out. Now, we don't use every element of the story and every marketing piece that we do, but we create this character, this avatar, and we flesh it out fully in writing. So when we need to, we can use bits and pieces of it in whatever we're attempting to do at the moment. Okay? So we want to give Mike we want to give Mike a good backstory, and we want to solve, really talk more about his problems. Then you can also get a little philosophical with Mike. Mike deserves his benefits that he's being denied in this particular case. It's always good here when you have the problem that if you can always establish a villain, because the villain is typically part of the problem. In our case, who is the villain in Mike's story?
Well, so what type of disability does he have?
Well, Mike has all types of disability going.
Okay, well then probably the insurance company.
Okay, so the insurance company or a government bureaucracy.
Yeah.
That's how we framed it in the Mike story. So under the story that we've developed, Mike has all 3 types of disability claims going on at the same time. He's got a veteran's disability claim, he's got a Social Security disability claim, and he's got a VA disability claim. And I could lay out some more detail about Mike and why he happens to have all 3 of these cases going on at the same time. For the sake of time, I don't want this to be a 3-hour podcast, but let's just assume that is correct. He's got all 3 types of disability claims going on. So who is our villain in the story? Ooh, a big, bad insurance company. Mm-hmm. If you can't figure out a way to make your insurance company a villain, you're not trying very hard. The government on the other side is a little bit more, esoteric, because it's like we don't want to make our government necessarily a villain, but the government bureaucracy, that's the villain. The fact that this big bureaucracy exists, it's non-feeling, it doesn't care, it just moves. It moves at an extremely slow pace. It has arbitrary rules that don't seem to make a lot of sense. There's nobody really pushing on the government side to get cases through faster and faster. So, we don't want to go and say the United States is bad or the U.S. government is bad, but we want to point out that the villain in the story is the bureaucracy of it all. So, sometimes you want to make sure you frame your villain correctly. For example, I one time tried a personal injury auto wreck case, and my client was the victim. They got rear-ended, and this was a case that we had not taken the deposition of the defendant, which was probably a mistake. So we try this case. She shows up, the defendant shows up. Very nice looking lady wearing a very pretty little white lace dress. And she gets on the stand and she says, my kid's sippy cup was in the back seat and the sippy cup fell underneath my floorboard and got stuck underneath my brake. And when I tried to hit the brake wouldn't depress because the sippy cup was stuck. I am so sorry. And like, okay, the jury just bought that up. I did not have a villain, okay? I should have explored that case a little further. This was in a younger part of my career, and I just assumed that this idiot who rear-ended my client, was going to look bad on the stand. I did not have a villain. That case did not go well.
Oh.
Now, well, I will say this. We did win. The jury gave us medicals, and that was it. No pain, but that's not good. You don't try a case to just get your medical bill.
Sure.
So the point is you have to be careful, about who your villain is. We are very fortunate that we get to go against the government and insurance companies. Our villains are very clear, but if you're doing other types of work, always make sure you know who you're going against, who the actual defendant is that's going to be sitting in the defendant's chair in a case, because that villain may not be that villainous,
or appear that villainous.
That was kind of got us off track. See, this is the fun part about podcasts, because we're not limited to time, Neri, really. So I can just keep going on and on telling more stories. But that had nothing to do with selling. But a good story always could use a good villain.
Yep. And so Donald Miller talks about 4 characteristics of a good villain. The villain needs to be the root source, not an emotion that's felt as a result of what's happening. The villain needs to be relatable. The villain needs to stand alone. And the villain needs to be something real.
Darth Vader.
Yep. All those things.
Perfect. Just hit all of
things.
those marks. Darth Vader hit it.
But
so does an insurance company.
Yeah, your defendant in white does not with the sippy cup. So,
all right.
What's the third element of SB7?
The guide. Guess who the guide is?
Us?
That's us.
Okay.
That's you out there. That's the lawyers
one thing
out there
right
listening. We are the guides. We are not the heroes. And this is hard. We were doing this presentation at Atticus pre-pandemic, and I was on stage with a couple of other lawyers, and we were doing a panel discussion over story branding. And there was one lawyer in the article who just was belligerent and adamant and refused to say that the client was the hero. No, I'm the hero. I'm the center of this story. And I'm like, we were all looking at him like, this guy just doesn't get it. Mm-hmm. This guy has an ego beyond belief. And he kind of disappeared from Atticus. He really didn't fit in.
It didn't work
It did not work for him. But no, you are the guide. Mm-hmm. You are the learned intermediary. You're the guide with empathy, but you also have authority. You've walked this path before. In other words, you have experience. You know the legal terrain. So we were trying to figure out, how do we phrase that? Or how do we use that concept of we're the guide? And particularly, the specific example I'm using here is when we put together our new website, which now is not new, but it was new, 5-6 years ago when we redesigned it, is how are we going to use the concept of the learned guide? We are the learned guide. So we came up with the phrase, you, meaning the hero, meaning the client, counted on their promise to pay, make them keep it. Explicit, you, the client, make them keep it. And then the tagline under that is, we've been helping clients make the insurance company keep their promises for over 30 years. In other words, we were the learned intermediary. We did not make ourselves the hero of that slogan. You, the client, make them keep their promises, and you do that by hiring us. So we used that whole, and we thought through that. It took us 3 or 4 days. This was before ChatGTP. We really wordsmithed the crap out of that, because the first things we came up with were like 3 and 4 and 5 sentences long, and we, they were way too long. You need when you're trying to do a catchy slogan, you've got to get it tight. And it took us days to kind of refine it and just get it down to, you counted on the promise to pay, make them keep it. We've been helping clients make them keep their promises for over 30 years. It just took us 2 or 3 days. Could have done that in 10 seconds with ChatGTP, but that's been our slogan, and it's because of this framework that we, have done it that way. We made the client the center of our marketing story.
And I think that one way to talk about yourself without making you the center of the story is to use testimonials. So obviously we, on our website, we use a lot of our 5-star Google reviews, because then it's not us talking about ourselves and trying to make us. We're trying to use those as an example of someone they can relate to.
Right.
So we're letting the testimonials speak for us and create I know you said empathy and authority earlier, but the testimonials are creating that authority for us without us doing it ourselves.
Right. You always want to have that third party person, touting you, kind of almost like at trial. You want to have your plaintiff on, but you don't want to have your plaintiff on, in front of a jury that long. What you would rather have is a lot of what we'd call before and after witnesses that can talk about the pain and suffering that the client went through. This is what he was like before the accident. This is what he was like after the accident. And you would rather present your client that way. Again, it's the same thing. You don't want to sit there and, vomit how great you are in front of a client, or in that case, in front of a jury. You want other third-party intermediaries to be your pitch person for you.
And I think using using statistics, one of the things that, I know we're talking about marketing, that we've had a lot of intake consultants talk to our intake team about whenever they do get that client on the phone is, how many clients we have helped before them. And so it's creating that empathy of, yeah, we absolutely know what it's like to go through to what you're going through, because we help clients like you every day. So there's that empathy, but it's also creating that authority by saying, yeah, I mean, you're unique and your story is unique, but we also know what you're going through.
Right. So the fourth part of the 7-part framework is now we have to have a plan. Okay. So we have the hero, he meets a guide who has a villain. Guide now needs to create the plan. What's the plan going to be? What's Obi-Wan telling Luke Skywalker he needs to do? Mm-hmm. So in our case, the plan, we have actually 3 or 4 different written out what we call proven processes. Now, this is from the book Traction, where it says you need to write out your quote-unquote proven process, or in story branding speak, write out your plan. What is the typical thing that you do to help your client? And so we have a process for how we go about trying to win Social Security disability cases. We have a process for how, we try to win VA disability cases, for insurance cases, and they're written out. And we give those plans in our marketing materials. We have client handbooks that we give our client for each different type of case that we're handling. And within that client handbook, there is a general, what we call a proven process plan or a plan of action. Now, it's fairly generic because it's written in a pre-printed marketing material, and of course it has those disclaimers in it. But generally speaking, these are the things that we do to take you through the process to improve your chances of winning your claim. And that's part of our marketing message to a client is we just don't tell them we're going to take care of them. We lay it all out in a written format. This is how we're going to take care of you. This is what we're going to do. We do a few other things. We have in our insurance contract, we can't do it in a SSD contract as easily, or a VA contract, but in the insurance contract we give people a 30-day out. If they don't like how we're handling their case in the first 30 days, we'll release them from their contract, no questions asked. Nobody's ever taken us up on that, by the way. Mm-hmm. But it gives them some measure of security when they're wanting to sign that contract, because it's the second paragraph in the contract. Here's the agreement. By the way, you have a 30-day out if you want to get out of this, and I think it certainly has helped way more than it has ever hurt. Again, I can't remember anybody that's ever taken us up on the 30-day out, but I think it has alleviated a lot of people earlier. But it's part of the plan. We're giving them a plan, and part of the plan is that you don't have to fully commit to us if you're not quite sure. You get a little bit of try before you buy.
Yep. And I think that you hit the nail on the head when you're talking about committing to us, because, for a client, especially, with any case, there is the opportunity cost of, what if I didn't go with another attorney? What if, there's a risk to committing to an attorney, to one solution, even though it seems like a very good, plausible solution. So by giving them that out, you're reducing some of that lost opportunity cost and making it easier for them, I think, to commit to you, while also giving them some clarity on how you're going to get them from where they are now to where they want to be in the future.
And so part of the plan, this is how the book pitches it, is that, you want to simplify the journey to make the clients more confident about moving forward with you. Now, I will say that there's a happy middle ground here. So you don't want to oversimplify the journey, because we know the legal process can be complicated. It can be twisted. There can be lots of shucking and jiving going on. But you don't want to overcomplicate it either, because then you scare them off. which is when we put together our proven processes. I kind of came up with the idea that 3 bullet points makes it too simple, but 20 bullet points makes it too complicated.
So somewhere between 3 and 20.
So somewhere between 3 and 20. So we settled on about 10 to 12. Now, I don't remember exactly the rationale, but we thought about that long and hard when I'd say we were writing this. It was me and I think Natalie Hightower were the ones writing these things.
Your old marketing director.
My old marketing director. And we kind of settled in, and I can't remember, it was probably over a margarita or something, but we kind of settled in on 10 to 12 bullet points, and the proven process was the sweet spot. I don't know that we ever A/B tested that, so I don't think there's any science behind it. It was literally kind of just a gut. But we didn't want to make it too complicated, but we didn't want to make it too simple either.
Yeah, because I think that leads right into step 5 of the SB7 process, which is a call to action. So you're trying to get them to challenge where they currently are, challenge their current status quo.
Right.
And so give them too much information and they might just be, data overload.
Data overload causes confusion, which causes inaction.
And that's what we're trying to do with this SB7 StoryBrand framework is to create clarity. So that's the exact opposite.
Right.
So talk to us a little bit, Mark, about the call to action, step 5.
So step 5 is call to action, which is what we want them to do. So in our world, the basic problem is that the client files for disability and gets a denial letter in the mail. So they always come to us with this denial letter in hand. In the denial letter, the last paragraph always gives them instruction on how they can appeal this denial and gives them their deadline. In an SSD case, it's 60 days. In a LTD case, it's 180 days. In the VA case, it 1 year, but depends. I won't even speak to that because it's too many moving parts there. But and so what we want them to do is we want them to take action based on that last paragraph in the letter. Okay, so our whole marketing campaign sort of revolves around that call to action because that last paragraph actually gives the client a call to action. Our defendant on the other side is actually doing us a favor because they're giving the client the call to action. We just need them to execute on it, which is and that's why it's in the last paragraph, not the first. I truly believe that's the reason it's structured that way because they hoping the client won't get that far. But the last paragraph gives them that plan, that call to action, which is you need to appeal. Now, what it doesn't say is that you need to hire an attorney to assist you with that. That would be great, and especially if they'd put our phone number right there. If we can negotiate that, we'd be golden. But the call to action, So our call to action is don't wait. You have a limited amount of time to file your appeal. And deadlines matter. Deadlines can be fatal in these situations. So you always want to be direct. You always want to be repetitive with the call to action. Call now, apply today, let us fight for you. Just go, go, go. So there needs to be no ambiguity in your call to action. Let's go now. Now. So 6 and 7. 6 and 7 to me are sort of
Two sides of the same coin.
two sides of the same coin. I'm not quite sure why they were split out, but they are. So we will go with it. So we got 6.
Avoiding failure. So I think these seem to flow very well together. So the call to action is, you're challenging, deadlines matter. And because if you don't, then you're trying to create that sense of urgency for the client, because if you don't, then you've lost the right to appeal your denial. And so your step 6 in the SB7 is to avoid failure. You're not fear mongering. You're not trying to work on fear.
Now that now it occurs to me why they split the 2 out, now that I had thought about it for a minute. There are studies out there that show that people are more motivated by fear of failure than by success.
Oh, that makes sense.
And that's your basic reptilian brain working right there. I am more afraid of getting eaten by the saber-toothed tiger than I am of, successfully going out into the savannah to find food. You know, I think that's the reason they split it out. So number 6 is avoiding failure. So what does failure look like in our context? If Mike does nothing, he has no income, he has no care, he has no peace of mind, and you paint the consequences of that failure. You don't want to do it to scare them, but you want to do it to motivate them. So we use that concept within our marketing material, you know. Basic concepts like, you know, how are you going to pay your rent? How are you going to pay your mortgage? How are you going to put groceries on the table? How are you going to get your prescriptions if you don't pursue this? You know, we use that. I know we use that in our pay-per-click ads, those types of phrasing. I know we've used it in our YouTube videos. I can't think of where else that we've used it in our TV ads. Those rhetorical questions, you know, how are you going to provide for your family if you don't take action now and take the next step, which is, of course, call us. Which then goes to the other side of the coin, which is the achieving success.
The final step of the SB7 framework.
Of the SB7. In that case, Mike wins. Mm-hmm. Yay, Mike wins. Not just benefits, but hope, dignity. He wins a way forward. His story ends with peace, with purpose, supporting his family. And remember, the success isn't about us winning. It's about Mike winning, about Mike achieving his goals.
Yeah, so you're painting a picture about where he could be in the future with your marketing strategy. So it's very clear where he is now. He's confused. He doesn't know a way forward. He's probably received this very scary, very lengthy denial letter. He doesn't know what it means. There is some deadline in there he thinks he might know, but then ultimately what your marketing strategy is doing is being very crystal clear about where he will end up. And I think that peace of mind thing is huge. I'd say especially for our clients, but maybe for any clientele.
Well, absolutely. I mean, I can just imagine, you know, in a PI context, you have somebody that's lost time from work, lost wages, got medical bills piling up, pain and suffering, all of this stuff. It all works the same.
Especially, I mean, even estate planning, knowing that you've left your family not just this huge headache when, you know, you've got it all taken care of.
I haven't worked it through from the estate planning side, but yeah, it makes sense too. I think you can craft the same type of story for all my estate planning friends out there, that, you know, if you don't take care of this now, you're going to leave this huge mess for your family. You're going to leave your surviving spouse destitute. There's all sorts of ways that you could craft
the taxes
a story.
Become the villain.
The taxes, the tax man, the tax boogeyman.
It's
could
an
be
easy
the villain.
One. Yep.
Oh, the probate process. This, you know, long drawn out, expensive probate, nasty probate process. You know, you can make the process the villain. It doesn't have to be a person. The process can be a villain itself.
And then having that at the end where you have that piece, I think that's something that's you're painting a picture for your person to where they want to be for your ideal client. So you've taken us through Mike the Mechanic, Mark. Where are we going in our last segment?
Well, I think what I want to do is I want to talk about how we built Mike the Mechanic and how we actually use him a little bit, maybe flesh out Mike's story a little bit to kind of inspire you out there, the listeners, to create your own Mike the Mechanic story. Let's call it Betsy the 5th grade school teacher story, or...
We'll work on this in the break.
We'll work on this in the break, yes. And with that, we'll take a quick break. We'll be right back. I'm Marc Whitehead, a lawyer, entrepreneur, and business coach. Thanks so much for tuning into the Successful Barrister podcast. We have a blast creating it, and I hope you find it helpful. If our chats have sparked your interest, I'd love to hear from you. Shoot me an email at marc@marcwhitehead.com. That's Marc spelled with a C. Enjoying the Successful Barrister newsletter. Even better, let's hop on a call. I'd love to chat about how we can collaborate, share ideas, or just catch up. All right, so in the break, we were discussing this, and our producer, Pepper, convinced us that we should at least give a short version of Mike the Mechanic.
Okay.
So I'll give the short version, and I actually gave this to the Mexican American Bar Association the other day. I was asked to present. I love you guys, especially Kevin, who asked me to speak over there. So here's our story of Mike the Mechanic.
Okay.
So 30 years ago, Mike was a mechanic in the Air Force stationed in San Antonio, Texas. He was on top of a C-130 cargo plane, which is one of these big four propeller, if I'm remembering correctly, a big four propeller prop cargo plane. As you can imagine, that wing was pretty high off the concrete tarmac. He fell off the wing. He was in his 20s. He shattered his back. The VA patched him up, put him back together. He got an honorable discharge. Ended up going to work as an aircraft mechanic for Continental Airlines, which has now morphed into or changed over, merged into United Airlines right here in Houston, Texas. Mm-hmm. You know, now Mike's in his mid-50s, and on a Sunday afternoon, Mike lifts up his granddaughter, and his back falls apart on him, okay? The other part of this story, and this is where we kind of added some elements of some other stories to when we were trying to modify it, was that 3 years ago, Mike had a slip and fall accident in a grocery store and injured his back then, but he never did anything about it. So I added a few modifications to the story because I was telling the story to a bunch of lawyers, and I was trying to get lawyers to think about the problems of the case. Okay, so the first problem in the case is, well, he can't file a claim for the slip and fall accident because his statute of limitations is run. 2 years Texas has a 2-year statute of limitations. So I was trying to get the lawyers to think about it. And then the second lawyer popped up and he goes, yeah, and he can't file a workers' comp claim, because, his back collapsed on a Sunday afternoon when he was picking up his granddaughter. It wasn't within the course and scope of his employment. So I asked, of course, I'm asking the rhetorical question to the group of lawyers. I was like, well, what can he do? And they kind of looked quizzical, and a lot of them knew the answer because they knew what I was there to talk about. But so that's when I go into the story. Mike has 3 potential claims. He has a claim for veterans disability benefits because he injured his back in service. And if he can connect his current back condition to his prior injury in service, he can make a VA disability claim. He can make a Social Security disability claim because he's been working in private industry paying Social Security taxes for the last 30 years. So he's covered under the Social Security system, so he can make a Social Security disability claim. And he can also make a claim under his employer's disability insurance plan because they have a group plan because he's working for a major corporation. So I said he's got all 3 of these claims going on at the same time. So what I was doing is I was using the Mike the Mechanic story in this circumstance to educate all of these lawyers. Most of them were doing family law or criminal law or immigration law or some personal injury law. And none of them knew anything about this disability systems really. So I was educating my audience through a story about Mike, the mechanic, about the types of claims that they need to be looking for, as opposed to telling Mike, well, sorry, your statute of limitations ran and you don't have a workers' comp claim because you didn't injure your back in the course and scope of your work, which is what an uneducated lawyer might say to that person. So that was my goal. So, and again, I added a few extra elements about the Sunday afternoon accident and our lifting incident and about the slip and fall. I added that to the story because, again, it's just a story. And I always disclaim when I'm telling the story to lawyers that this is an amalgamation of a couple of different clients. I don't lie to them or anything. But the point is, by telling this story, it laid out vividly to this group, I think it was about 30 or 40 lawyers, exactly what we do for a living. Okay, so what's the question? The first question that pops up. Marc, how do you get paid? That was the very first question. So that, again, leads me to the next part. I was like, well, we get paid on a contingency fee basis. And I go through the different pay structures and the caps and everything like that. So what do you think is my next question? Hey, Marc, can you pay referral fees on these types of cases? Why, yes, I can. And this is, how it works. And the next question, well, Marc, how can we refer these cases to you? And I give them, it was beautiful. I mean, they literally, everything that I wanted to get out, because I'm basically speaking to this group because I want them to refer me cases, it just flowed like clockwork because I told a compelling story that interested them. I had a lot of people raise their hand and ask questions about their specific family members that were going through this exact same thing, particularly the veteran side. I had like 5 questions from people who had, my cousin is, was a sergeant in the Air Force or whatever. And they started asking questions like, Mark, can I send my cousin to you? If I would have just gone in there and started talking about, this is a Social Security case, this is how it works, that would have bored them to death because they don't care. They really don't care how it works. They just want to know what it is. Or the same thing about the veterans or how an insurance claim works. They don't really care. I know if you're trying to do CLE events, and you have to get technical and get into the legal side. But this was just a basic luncheon. Actually, it was a dinner, is what it was. And they just want to know the basics. They just want to kind of get a general overview of it. And then, if anybody wanted any specific questions about, hey, tell me about the 5-step sequential evaluation process and tell me how listing 1.75 works under this specific section, I'd have told them that. They didn't care. They were just interested in the Mike the Mechanic story. And if I can do that with a group of lawyers who are, fairly sophisticated and, to some extent fairly jaded, I can certainly do this same type of storytelling, with a layperson group. If I got this story out if I got to speak in front of the local Lions Club or the local Rotary or the local Chamber of Commerce or something. But it's a great way to take a story and explain to people what you do.
Well, so I think that, it makes it so clear. Disability can be so niche. And I actually sat through one of those. I didn't even get CLE for it, but I sat in through what is a VA disability practice? And I thought it was going to be, I knew a little bit about it, so I thought it would be really interesting. And I was bored to tears.
Bored out of your mind. Nobody wants to. Nobody. This is why we do the Successful Barrister podcast and newsletter. We don't do a disability newsletter. You'd be bored out of your mind. You wouldn't listen.
I mean, it is. I'm glad for the clientele that we serve. So using the SB7 framework, let me see if I can piece it together, Mark. So our character is Mike, the mechanic. He has a problem. He has now a back problem that he can't use his workers' claim for. He's bypassed his statute of limitations for his slip and fall. So your guide is us. We have a plan now. The people now have a plan. They're going to call us because the call to action is...
the call to action.
We have a call to action. And, to avoid failure, is it to, hey, client, sorry, you're just out of luck? Right? Is that the avoiding the failure part of it? The story is previously they didn't know how to advise a potential client or, someone who would come to them asking for help, and then ends in a success for everybody. The client gets a good referral. You obviously get a new client we can help, and the referring attorney gets referral fees.
Yeah. So I use this even a shorter version. So here's my stick. You should always have an elevator pitch, a 30 to 60 second, what do I do? Mm-hmm. And it needs to have a hook. So I will give you for free mine. So please don't copy it too much, but take the elements. So somebody else like, Mark, what do you do? And I go, well, I'm the luckiest lawyer out there. I get to go to work every day and help workers and veterans on their disability claims. And then that will automatically spur a question. What do you mean? What's a disability claim? Mm-hmm. I'll go, well, the best way I can explain it to you is my client, Mike. And Mike hurt his back 30 years ago. It was when he was in the Air Force. And I said today, in his mid-50s, Mike has a back problem related to his service in the military. He has a disability claim that he can make under the Social Security Administration's Social Security Disability Program. And he can make a claim under his insurance policy. I help Mike with all of these problems. Okay, that was 60 seconds. I explained my entire practice to some layperson in less than 60 seconds by using Mike as the storyboard.
In a very compelling way, I think.
In a compelling way. And it's hard to do that. How do you explain the nuances of everything that we do, a 75-person law firm that has all of these divisions and sections and blah, 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 blah. It's really hard to boil that down. And I have found that the easiest way to boil it down is just to tell a quick little story.
Yeah, and the SB7 framework is a great way to do that.
Yes.
So highly recommend.
All right. So my producer Pepper over here has been pawing on me, telling me that our time is up.
Do people know that our producer is a dog? Otherwise, pawing just makes it sound very...
Pepper is a Yorkshire Terrier who sits in on all of our podcasts. And we know if we're doing well, because if Pepper's happy, that means we're doing well. If Pepper looks like he's got gas or something, that means we're not doing so good. So
Okay, so Pepper pawing at you is literally
Pepper
is
pawing at me says that we're out of time.
All right.
Boy, we just got off track there, didn't we? But that's okay. Anyway, I want to thank everybody for listening to the Successful Barrister Podcast, where legal legends are made. I'm Marc, and together we're the dynamic duo of law. So remember to rate and review us wherever you get your podcasts. And if you've enjoyed this podcast, tell your friends. Go make up a story. Make up your own Mike the Mechanic story. I would like to hear. Oh, that's what we're going to do. My email, marc@marcwhitehead.com. I want to hear your Mike the Mechanic story. Okay? And maybe we'll put some of them on the air. So, or if you just want to bounce some ideas off, if you can't figure out your Mike the Mechanic story, send me an email. We'll discuss it. Also, visit us at successfulbarrister.com. And remember to visit our sponsor, Marc Whitehead and Associates, a national disability law firm, at disabilitydenials.com. And with that, go find your Mike.
Bye.